Hi everyone on the call. Thank you so much for joining and welcome to this session where we are very delighted to have a WFA member share his recent experience with their consultant partner to transcreate global messages so they resonate at a global level. But just to put faces to names, so I'm Laura on the left side, and together with my colleague Hannah, we're going to make sure that this webinar is run smoothly. And on the right, so our two great guest speakers, Melanie. So Melanie is the CEO of a cross-cultural consultancy called Creative Culture, and Stephen, Marketing Director at AXA XL, a division of AXA Insurance. Before I hand over to our speakers, I would like to introduce the WFA for those of you who are less familiar with our organization. So just in one slide, this is us. So we are a not-for-profit membership organization. We've been around since 1953, so that's about 67 years. And since then, we've been representing the interest of our members. So as you can see on the screen, our members represent around 180 companies. So, and they are a combination of global brand owners. So you should see your company logo. And if not, maybe it's time for you to join our network. And so these brand owners represent about 2/3 of our membership. There are over 120 of them. And we also welcome national associations of advertisers in our membership, such as ANA in the US, APAN in Portugal, SDE, the Hellenic Advertisers Association in Greece, JA in Japan, the Finnish association that we had this morning. I don't know if you have anyone in the call today, this afternoon. But about 60 of them will also represent the interest of their members at a national level. And they've been of a tremendous support to the WFA lately to gather advertising and marketing insights at a local level. So you may actually even have received the invitation to this webinar from one of them. So thank you so much. And again, welcome to all of you. So there are about 25 attendees on the call today. So thank you for joining. Since we represent the interest of our members, our agenda is fully driven by our members' priorities. Obviously, this isn't breaking news anymore, but COVID-19 is having a massive impact on our members right now. And we want to provide as much support as we can. So we have created a series of webinars. They're called Crisis Clinic series. You can replay them all if you weren't able to attend, but also research documents, top tips to bring value at the time of the virus. Everything is available onto our website. And our COVID compendium, for instance, is accessible to everyone, including brands that are not members of the WFA. Today's session isn't specific to COVID-19, but I believe it is still very relevant to today's challenges and may help you, hopefully that session may help you identify new practices that you can apply as soon as this webinar is over. So let me give you one example. So in a context where global average marketing budgets have been reduced, there is, and there will still be a need for content for brands to engage with their consumers. That's always going to be true and happen. During the COVID-19 crisis, for instance, and this is for many different reasons, but we saw in China and this is some feedback that we received from our members based there, that to maintain the production of content, they have, so 65% of them have reused or repurposed existing content, which I assume at some point required some translation and hopefully some transcreation initiatives if they use content from another market. And this is raising to me as well the importance of diversity and inclusion. So in most cases, if you want your content to resonate at a local level, reach your consumers the way you want, and not to sound awkward or inappropriate, you can't just reuse some content that was produced at a global regional level or in a different market than yours without some degree of adaptation. And there are so many other good reasons to get your head around transcreation that I'm sure Melanie and Stephen will illustrate now.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute Pleasure to be here today alongside Stephen to discuss a topic that is really dear to me, which is that of transcreation. Languages and cultures have always been part of who I am as a person. I was raised all over the world, from Taiwan to Brazil, Cameroon, and then back to France, the mother country, a few months in Spain, and now 15 years in the UK. It's always something I've been very sensitive to, and I do believe there are many, many ways that we can keep on improving how we communicate with different audiences from different countries and different cultural backgrounds in general. So I decided to set up Creative Culture 12 years ago, having spent several years in transcreation solely, to try and support further clients, whether they be brands or agencies, in rolling out campaigns and messagings that resonate across different countries, and looking at the various touch points and when in the process is best to start looking at the local insights to truly feed global campaigns that resonate and are not just a reproduction of one into another language simply. I have been very lucky to be working with Stephen and his team since 2016, starting with Excel Catlin at the time, which then moved on to becoming Excel. And we've worked on a range of different materials, including advertising and marcomms. And I think we've been very lucky because for a B2B organization, they've always been really open to creativity and finding really a spin on how to better engage with their customers. Stephen, to you.
Yeah, hi. I'm background similar to Melanie's. Multi-culti. You can tell by the name that I'm Scottish, but I had a German mother. I grew up mainly in Scotland, but spent a lot of time in Germany. I now live in Switzerland, and I studied languages and also translation as well. So I do understand there's a difference between transcreation and translation, and that's something that's always been quite, I think, close to my heart as well, because it really is important to engage with clients in their local mindset and in their local language as well. I'm part of a team here in Zurich, global team. We have colleagues across the globe, in Australia, Singapore, obviously here in Europe, in Italy, Spain, France, and UK, of course. Then, of course, the North America team as well on top of that. So we deal with a lot of different cultures, a lot of different languages, and a lot of different, let's say, challenges, but they're always great to have, and that's part of the excitement of the job that I do. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. So we thought we would begin the session with a quick poll to understand who you are and who's attending on the other side. Please, could you tell us what your role is in the company with regards to translation or transcreation? Good, so there's a good variety of people, and it's great to hear that some of you have been involved in the process already. Should make it really useful. So to kickstart the session, I wanted to run you through an advert that has been thought for a local audience and developed locally. Obviously, there's never any more powerful way of knowing your market and developing something that you know will resonate with them. This is an advert for an instant noodle brand that was run in Japan. And the imagery and the style mimics the typical adverts that are developed for tower blocks, something that is quite popular in Japan. Here, as you can see on the visual, the one on the right-hand side is an actual advert for a tower block, and the left-hand side one is related to the pot noodle ad. And there is always a column of light that sort of shares where the building will be built. And they've used this sort of representation to highlight the instant noodle pots. They've also done quite a lot of playful things, which you would understand if you speak Japanese. But things like generally south-facing residence is quite a big attraction for Japanese customers, facing the light, obviously. And here they've turned it into upward-facing residence to highlight the pot noodle pot. They've also made a reference to it being ready in 3 minutes. Again, this would be highlighted in sort of explaining how far or how close the train station is to the building lot. So really quite interesting cultural references here that might not be understood from other countries, obviously. And I think, again, when we look at global, local, and local, transcreation is trying to come and achieve this, whether you're developing things centrally or more hand in hand with your markets. And this is where the true value is. So in my part, we'll be looking at a bit more theory, understanding what the components of transcreation are, why it's important, and where it creates value for all the stakeholders across the board. The first little first video I wanted to show you is what I call the taxi analogy. I think it's quite interesting one because it's quite straightforward. None of us would expect to be fetched from the same cab in New York, in London, or in Mumbai. So the question here really is, why would we expect communications to be the same across all of the countries? Why shouldn't the imagery or the messages be tweaked to make a lot more impact with your audiences? Another interesting fact and figure here that was taken from a survey from trade group Worldwide ERC in 2014, which uncovered that 95% of senior execs from top global corporations felt that cultures can actually be at the source of their success or failure in the various projects they undertake. And this is obviously the cultural element is where transcreation can make a big difference. So what is transcreation? So it's same, but slightly different. As opposed to translation, as Stephen was raising, the real value here is it enables brands to really make the most out of global consistency and yet local relevance by integrating a lot of elements such as the brand's tone of voice, looking at the local culture, the language, how you can play with it, make it into an advantage as opposed to a threat. And the idea obviously is to convey the intent and the meaning as opposed to translating the words. As we will see in a moment, there's a lot around personalization nowadays, and it is also something that it allows as opposed to translating pieces directly. Now, this example is a bit of a disaster one, and that showcases that transcreation is not just about words, it's also about the messages and the choices that are made by brands. Lansing in 2008 launched the New Delta worldwide and decided to have Richard Gere as their brand ambassador. So far, so good, obviously. But as it happens, Richard Gere has been known for many years as being a keen Buddhist and a close person to the Dalai Lama, which didn't go very well into one of the world's key automotive markets, which is China. So immediately after this, they were asked to remove the adverts off air and to make apologies. So just a quick one to say that effectively it is transcreation can be as good as the foundations that you've built them on. So it's about the teams being relevant, proactive, and sensible about certain topics, and remembering to always test run everything that is being developed locally in the key markets, whether it be through your partners or through experts. So how can it be really effective? And I think this is the point I was making in the previous example. Everyone knows transcreation to be really at the end of the process, once you've gone through creating your assets, and it goes along the production stage of the process, and when you're looking at engaging with your audiences. But we shouldn't forget that with the right cultural preparation work and including all of those cultural elements earlier enough in the process, by looking at the trends, what the competition is doing, what are the channels to be used in a market as opposed to another, and so on. This is only enriching the global concept and ideas that you're developing to then make them even more relevant at a local level, and then enabling a good transcreation work as well. So to raise really the value of transcreation, understand where you can really benefit, I thought it was useful to look at what the hidden costs of translation are and ones that people don't necessarily think about. So what happens when a translation goes wrong? So in the first scenario, the translation goes live, and in this day and age, as we know, it goes at the speed of light with social media. Suddenly it's all over the world in a matter of minutes or hours. And brands have to go into intense crisis management mode and develop some comms around this, which has an impact obviously from a budget standpoint, because you have to release new budgets to do campaigns in a very urgent manner. But also it's very damaging for brand reputation, which often takes a long time to recover from. Second scenario, which hopefully is what happened more often than not, it gets caught before it goes live. In this case, one of the things that can happen, it puts a lot of strain on the local teams who have to rewrite the content and spend a lot of time doing that. Obviously, it comes with quality issues because your local teams might be marketing, they might be sales, but they are not professional writers or translators or copywriters. And then there is a huge, or there could be a huge allocation problem in terms of resources and inefficiencies, because people are spending a big chunk of their day doing something that they're not responsible for in the first place. There are also issues that can occur around disengagement, and when things go from bad to worse, it could obviously lead to people changing jobs and there being issues with recruitment and handover. Another thing to think about when this happens is budget and inefficiencies there. So whilst translation has quite a low face cost attached to it, if your teams are not going to reuse the translations, and this happens on a recurring way, why are you paying those budgets in the first place anyway? And then another thing that could happen if it gets caught before it goes live is that the local teams decide to completely ignore the work that you've developed centrally in the translations and do their own thing. What happens then is that there are brand inconsistencies because your campaigns might not be in line in each of the countries of what you were trying to do and achieve centrally, and you create further disengagement as well. Another aspect, obviously, is budget inefficiencies here because it is a lot more costly for each of the countries to develop their own materials than actually use some work that was developed centrally in the first place. So here we have another quick poll for you related to the previous slide. From the hidden costs of translation that we've just identified, are there any that you hadn't considered before? Stephen?
Interesting one as well. Yeah, I mean, we didn't have any of these major issues, if I'm very honest, but again, I can understand why crisis communication would be an important one. You know, we as a brand and our approach to transcreation has always been extremely thorough. That, you know, we get sign off where we require it. We work closely with the legal teams and with the country leaders as well. So yeah, I think we've managed to steer quite safely around any of the issues that, you know, that other companies may have faced.
Great, thank you. Moving on and looking at one of the aspects that you actually have just raised, Stephen, is crisis management and crisis communications. This was an example for a well-known international bank in 2009 who developed a campaign and strategy around their private banking segment. And the tagline that they used at the time was "Assume nothing." And sadly, when it went into translation, it was adapted as "Do nothing." So that obviously is not a very engaging message and not one encouraging people to come to the bank and do business with them. And from various sources that can be found online, there was quite an impact related to that. One was to cancel the 5-year strategy plan that they had put together for this, reposition the whole private banking segment, and the costs were estimated at $10 million, redoing a new campaign after that. And obviously there were some implications around brand reputation at the time. But the positive note is that what they developed after went on being really successful. So a quick one here on processes and quality assurance, which make transcreation different from translation. There's a lot of layers to how the work is done before it gets to you as a client. The first one is to put together detailed briefs that will tell the writers more about the brand, its tone of voice, its intent, what the campaign is trying to achieve, if there are any specific requirements regarding things such as length restrictions, for example, anything that can guide the local writer or the native writer to produce something that would be really, really relevant and convey the original intent. Then there's another phase that is related to content analysis. Here it's about reviewing the copy because obviously the writers are native in their language, but they aren't native in English. So there are aspects that they might miss or not understand. So here's really guiding them through really the finesse of the original copy and why it was written in the way it was. So it can be expressions, sayings, technical terminology. The use of two writers that are subject matter experts is also a big one because there will be a lot more critical view on the copy and how it can be improved. The rationals in the comments, this is also one that is important because when you adapt copy and you make choices on how to write it, helps by commenting on it, helps really the local point of contact understand what was done in the copy to then make their decision in terms of what they want at their end. Back translations can be very helpful. So this is in the case that central teams would be approving the content and not speak the original language. It's back translated into English and gives all those little sort of hints of where the differences are. And then obviously there are lots of rounds of review before the copy gets to you. A big part of what the transcreation does is provide you with a brand guardian establishing consistency tools like glossaries and memories to remember what we've done on previous projects, but also by ensuring the approval of the content with your local contacts and really engaging into a dialogue with them to understand what it is they are after. So transcreation in the era of social, one of the great tools that digital has given to marketeers is this ability to personalize and to really reach the consumers or customers in the best way possible. And these figures, the data we found from different sources, really showcase that across different countries around the world, it is really where we're heading towards and what consumers and customers are expecting. In China, young Chinese are even reshaping the luxury industry and looking at different personalized way, online and offline, that they can interact with those brands. So really this puts us to ask ourselves, so why is translation even relevant in the first place? And isn't it more about understanding the audiences and tweaking the message to make sure that it works and it resonates to them? Another aspect is more than country cultures, it's also now about subcultures, because at the end of the day, you're targeting people more and more related to their areas of interest and why they're fond about a certain activity or a certain topic. And there will be commonalities across different countries here, even though the segments might be quite different. And the last thing to remember is your local marketers and teams are not trained planners, they're not researchers or copywriters. So it is really useful if you can give them the expert help that they need to succeed. Another area that we don't often relate transcreation to is SEO. And you must wonder why we've chosen this visual in the first place to talk about this topic, but this relates to a project we worked on a few years ago in Indonesia for a deodorant brand. So the headquarters based here in London were looking at developing some blog content around their deodorant products to get more engagement with the consumers. And this was very heavily driven by SEO and keyword research. So instead of having an article in English translated into a number of languages, they wanted to proactively use keyword research to understand what creates the trigger with your local audiences. And what came about is one of the top results in the keyword research was how to whiten armpit skin with deodorant. So it's a product benefits that customers in Asia are very aware of, but the headquarters in London certainly weren't. So instead of developing the two same versions of the article, they allowed us to really tweak it in the transcreation process so that we would really have content that responds to the needs and the expectations locally. So following this, we thought it would be an interesting exercise for this webinar to look at other countries on a similar topic. Brazil is the country in the world with the highest penetration rate for deodorant. They have 95% of the population who states they use deodorant. And men grooming is a trend that has increased a lot over the last few years in Brazil. And the column you see in the middle of the screen is the suggested terms when you search the word deodorant in the first place in Portuguese. And as you can see, the masculine side rates a lot higher than the feminine one. Which shows it's an angle that can be taken when writing blog content or transcreating it. So say you were taking the topic of sports, which is relevant with deodorant, obviously a big one for Brazil would be to associate it with football, which Rexona did very well in this campaign you can see here. Another football country is Holland, and whilst it is a big football country, there are actually other topics that are more relevant to associate with deodorant, which Axe here has done really well. As you know, Dirk Kuyt is a very big football player and he's very well acclaimed in his home country, but Martin Garrix scores a lot higher in terms of search results. And so this is where you realize that this combination and association makes more sense for Holland. And when you look at the SERPs, you can realize that the search of deodorant in Holland is very purchase driven because the top hitting results on websites lead directly to point of sales and retailers. Another European country on a completely different topic, Spain, who are really looking into all the eco and natural either products that are related to antiperspirants. What is interesting to understand though is in Spain, the focus is not just on health and how aluminum might be bad for your body and for yourself. it's also looking at the planet, and really the eco side can be seen from all the SERPs that are posted here, which are all really blogs related to eco, environment, natural and organic, fundamentally. So all in all, this just highlights this need of personalizing the SEO and taking advantage of the fact that you can see what the consumers are looking for on the various search engines, and translation just of an English keyword to transcreate an article or translate it won't have the same results. So we thought we'd do another quick poll here for you, looking at how, if in your knowledge, you know how SEO and local content is developed, if your teams are taking this local keywords to proactively manage the blog contents digitally, or if they translate the keywords. Stephen, did you have any comments on this specifically?
Yeah, and because we're a global team and we do have people on the ground in the major markets, we do our local keyword research ourselves, together with our digital team.
Okay. And does that define some of the local content that the teams will develop?
Yeah, we do try to make sure that copy does include, where possible, any of the keywords that we come up with. Yeah, and of course on our website as well, we do definitely make sure that we are findable somehow. Yeah. So
here there are shared answers. Quite a few I don't know, I suppose, because it's not your remit, of course, but also some who do the local keyword research with it, which is always great to hear, obviously. So if you are new to transcreation, I thought I would draw a little roadmap on how to go about it, remembering that it is a collaborative journey. Transcreation really has a payoff in the short, medium, and long term, and the effects can be seen very quickly, provided that the setup is right at your end. One thing that can be interesting to do is to organize an internal survey, about existing translations across departments to see what the feedback is, if people are happy and happy, why. Identify the pain points. So it could be speed, quality, the level of service, consistency, the tone of voice that is not portrayed, the strains on the teams that we discussed. These are all the KPIs that you will be using to then track how well you're doing as you make the model evolve. Remember that with language, messages, and brand reputation, it's all about measuring the value. So it's not the face price tag. You have to see this as an investment. Whilst translation might be cheaper than transcreation, the effects across the teams and the organization are really, really positive. Another thing to think about is to get content champions or ambassadors internally. Those who are the most unhappy will always be the best advocates to make sure things are right and managed right in the long run. Testing one or several suppliers obviously is a really good idea, but also looking at different markets and different materials, because not everyone will be good at everything. So the challenges across the materials might change from the creativity, the tone of voice, looking at space limitation, for example. And so having a bit of a panel to look through it, a variety, will really help you make your mind. Ask them as well what processes and quality assurance they put into place and the tools that they use to support your long-term ambition, because every brand is different and has different objectives. So a different supplier might be more suited to what you are currently trying to achieve. And look at the tools that they use as well. So CAT tools, which are translation memory tools, are very good for long copy when there's a huge amount of repetition and that the teams might be working in silos. Glossaries are great for terminology. As well, the quality assurance framework is obviously a big one to making sure the end result is good. And looking at the profiles and the teams that they work with really will be helpful, because if they rotate with the same people across all of the projects, this is where you will get this familiarity with the brand and the consistency in the long term. Ask them to showcase the profiles that they work with. They can send some bios, examples of what they've done in the past, and share them with your local market, because by involving them, you really make them feel involved in the process, and it will really facilitate the process in the long run. It is all about dialogue, and it's making sure that the setup works for everyone internally. And lastly, ask the agency or agencies their experience in terms of stakeholder management, because at the end of the day, a big part of making transcreation successful is to have someone on the other side who will understand your requirements at a central level, as well as what the local markets want, and make you meet in the middle, basically. The compromise doesn't mean the lowest denominator. It means about finding a solution that works for everyone in the organization. A last quick one on return on investment and metrics. So how do you know if it works? Remember, quality is value, as we were mentioning. So team satisfaction is something that will always tell you a lot about how things are going. So think about doing several surveys and pulses on an ongoing basis. Ask more than one person or team. Looking at resource allocation, how much less time are they spending validating? Because that, again, is a proof of quality. In terms of consistency across channels, you can see really the effect on the brand reputation and the voice. If this has gone better throughout the process, again, it's a really strong point for the teams. Team collaboration and engagement. Has transcreation helped internal stakeholders align and comply with what you're developing centrally? If you see an improvement there, again, you're doing something right. So all in all, translation or transcreation does not have to be a headache, and I hear this very often. People think to think that it's normal, and it isn't. So identify what the pain points are, and then make resolutions to see how you can work around those to make it better. Now, before I pass on to Stephen, last poll for you, if you don't mind. So what would you say is the headache factor with translations in your organization? Would you say is cost-related, processes, quality, inconsistencies, diverging needs from the various stakeholders, disengagement, or none of the above? You are actually currently happy with the translations. This actually is a good way to pass on to you, actually, Stephen. What is your experience?
Yeah, I think the comparison of the two, it's definitely always been quality when we've, worked with translation agencies in the past. Yeah, they're good at certain things, which is fine. Let's say the regular policies and what have you, the technical stuff. But when it comes to translation, transcreation, and using the language creatively, then it just didn't cut it for us at all.
Interesting. There is actually quite a broad range of responses here, and the diverging needs from the stakeholders is probably one that our friends from supply chain and procurement are very well aware of, because they manage those expectations on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that as well. In terms of the questions that we sometimes get regarding costs. But again, that's, as you said already, it's not cost, it's investment. Yeah, so maybe some background, on who we are and what we do. We at AXA XL, we were acquired. Well, XL Group was acquired by AXA 2 years ago, and we are the commercial insurance division of AXA Group. We employ around about 9,000 people globally. We serve clients in close to 200 markets worldwide as well. So we really are a globally set up organization. So of course that makes it all the more important for us to really engage with our clients, which are not commercial, not personal lines business for us, but real top end top companies globally, global players, medium-sized companies as well. So it really is business rather than, let's say, the personal lines like health or cars, that sort of thing. Which, of course, we are talking to an audience which is, demanding, and historically, this was, to put it into some kind of context. We always believed that because we're commercial insurers, we could talk to our clients in English. So any advertising that we did, it was, I would say, with the exception of perhaps China, it was all in English and it was all printed, which made, let's say, put specific demands on how we actually addressed our clients. In 2012, XL Group, we rebranded, and we also, that came in parallel actually ultimately with the transition from pure print into digital worlds as well, which meant that we could actually start to look at addressing and speaking with our audiences in a different way. So we decided to have a bit of an exercise and address the two key markets for us, which were Germany and France. And we came up with let's say a series of ads that that did work but didn't really necessarily work perfectly. The important thing for this particular exercise when we rebranded was the change in our tone of voice. We didn't talk at people, we actually tried to engage with them, and we adopted a real conversational style to really make sure that we remained approachable. That was one of the key findings that we got when we surveyed our client base, brokers, clients, was that they really liked working with us because we were approachable, we were people, and we wanted to maintain that in the style, in the way that we actually advertise as well. The process back then was quite straightforward. We, as let's say, there were some linguists on the team, so we could develop the content in French and in German ourselves, which was quite straightforward. So we did all that in-house. The design process took place in-house and still does, by and large. The approval process was pretty straightforward. We would reach out to the local leaders and they would approve, along with legal as well, to make sure that we weren't falling into any traps. Then in 2015, we acquired Catlin, and their approach to, let's say, advertising and marketing was slightly different from the one that Excel Group had. So we decided to follow that path and really look at producing more in foreign languages, in local languages, to make sure that we were talking to the target groups in the right way. And we did also discover as well that people aren't always that comfortable being spoken to in English all the time as well. So that was a great opportunity for us. So we did then focus on the 5 key markets for us: Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and Portuguese in Brazil. These were the 5 languages that we identified as being the key, what I call the usual suspects, and that's the language set that we work with by and large now. But of course, we don't all speak these languages, so that's where we decided we really have to find a partner that we can work with, which is why it was so good to then meet up with Melanie and her team as well to start working on creating something very, very different. Yeah, and it was different because we weren't just translating. I think the message must be quite clear to most of us now is that translation doesn't work for everything. The traditional sense, translation is a great value, but it doesn't do what we want to do, what we want to achieve. We had a different style of advertising, we had a different tone of voice, and we were actually out to, I wouldn't say provoke, but at least get people's minds moving and thinking, this is a different. What is this company? Who are they? What are they doing? The great thing about working with Creative Culture, of course, is that they do have the language skills. Whenever you need them, they have a solution for you, which is great. The creative, and of course, they do understand the local markets as well. And that was really important for us to know that we have a partner that we can work with that can highlight things that may not be working right and really give us some direction as well. And obviously, of course, understanding the markets and who we're talking to, they really knew. I wouldn't say our target audience down to the last detail, but they knew how to speak to them, because ultimately, we're talking to experts in the insurance world, but of course they're also people. They want to engage or be engaged in a way that is, something they can relate to at a personal level as well. The great thing, of course, about doing this sort of thing is that or a transcreation exercise with Creative Culture, is that you don't just get one solution. You get a selection of options that you can choose from. So you actually then can tailor the final creative, the headline, the copy to something that really will work for your market and that gets local acceptance as well. And of course, the explanations that Creative Culture do provide as well. Why did they go for that particular phrase, that word? That always helps as well to convince the local audiences. Of course, moving forward, we did, as I said before, we moved away from print where possible to the digital world, because there are so many more newsletters now, and people subscribe to them. There are digital publications, and especially at this time where people don't want to be touching paper, the digital world is doing a great job now as well. Does bring challenges. As I said here, German is a long language, so getting a headline that can work quite succinctly in English may not necessarily work in German. Maybe the same in other languages. I know that Spanish can be quite wordy as well. So that was another of the challenges that we really had to set. Creative Culture, this is the space, this is the banner size that we're going to be using. We don't need an encyclopedia. We need something that really is to the point, gets the reader's attention quickly, and tells the story. And that was the great thing about transcreation, that you really do have this opportunity to really engage and do it in a meaningful way as well for the audiences. This is just an example of one of the ads that we transitioned from the old Excel Catlin world into the AXA XL world last year. We had a very brief launch campaign for 2 years ago, a brief launch campaign for the new company, and then we got back to our regular business of trying to sell our product. This particular ad, the thinking behind it was we identified that many of our clients, they only really buy one line of business from us, and they don't actually know that we do other things as well, that we can offer, insurance cover for all the other risks that they may be facing within their company. So this ad was one that we thought, yeah, it works from the old world into the new world. Find the right combination that makes your company, that helps your company cover the risks that they're facing. So let's look at some of the language versions we did on this. So in English, we're cracking the right combination to cover your business risks, which if you look at the other languages, you'll see that, you know, this was by and large adopted in the other markets. The Italian colleagues, they decided to go a different way. They didn't necessarily talk about, you know, cracking the combination. They addressed the problem head on. You've got business risk problems, or you're facing business risks. So let's unlock the potential, the combination to actually give you the cover that you need. So a nice way of turning the whole thing around. They ask the question, and the response then comes in also in the headline, but also in the copy as well. A nice way of doing it. Last year, we AXA, the AXA group, they launched the Know You Can campaign. So we, of course, as being part of the group, we followed suit. We had to develop a special series of ads that really address the business needs, which when you look at the images, they don't really seem all that business-like. But again, this is just us capturing the culture that we wanted to maintain. We wanted to take it a fun way, or an engaging way, a different way of looking at you know, business problems, business risks. So again, we're inviting our audiences to really take action, and at the same time, we're showing that just the capabilities that we have. We can help you get back to business fast after you submit your claim. We are the right partner from you. You know, yeah, if you're a global company, we can help you at markets across the world as well. And of course, one of my favorites is preparing for the unpredictable. This is about risk consulting. You know, a guy with an inflatable flamingo isn't necessarily going to save your life, but at the same time, that was one of the issues that we did have, believe it or not. But again, it's just this tongue-in-cheek approach to how we do these things. We followed the AXA style of use of photography, and we rolled this out across the markets successively over the course of the year. So again, let's look at one or two of the examples here. This is the getting answers, which again, as you can see, excuse me, the headline was maintained in a few languages, but not in all of them. For example, if you look at the Spanish one there, the top line in the middle, we asked people, we invited them to help them find solutions. You know, we listen to you, you can listen to us, we can help you find the solution that you're looking for. And this again was reflected in the copy that Creative Culture helped us produce. The example below that is the example from Brazil, in Brazilian Portuguese, which again is not about getting answers. It's about just get to the point. You know, don't delay. Just, you know, really get the information, the feedback, the response that you need. So get to the point, which is again what we can do. You just, you know, call us and we will do what we can to help you. So again, 3 different ways of doing the same thing, but also reflecting the market needs as well. Another one here, again, the guy balancing the globe on his fingertip. It's very playful, which thinking globally, yes. Is it playful? Well, potentially it can be. It can be an adventure, which is what we did with the French version, or when I say we, Creative Culture did with the French version. They said, you know, the world is your oyster. Ultimately, you can really, it's a playing field for you. And you know, if you don't play, you don't take the risks, you're not going to do anything new. You're not going to make anything. You're not going to make any changes. And this was something that we, you know, potentially could have been a bit of a risk, but it wasn't. It was actually something that went down really well in the French market as well. So yeah, just different ways of looking at the same story. We had actually planned, of course, to continue the Know You Can campaign into this year, but this thing called COVID, which of course Laura mentioned earlier, that came along to, I would say, spoil the fun. But it really ultimately meant that we had to then, within a matter of days, come up with new campaigns, and obviously foreign language versions of the campaigns that we developed in-house as well. So this one is addressing we came up with a series of ads, and this is just one that talks about this, the cyber security for people working from home in these times. So of course, if you look at the transcreations, you know, we're looking at, let's say, the French, for example, that teleworking can pose on the threats on the cyber security of your business. The same thing with the Spanish as well. You know, you're protecting your business against virtual attacks. The German version uses the charming phrase "home office," which sounds delightful when you've been there for a week, but after 8 weeks, it comes a bit more like drudgery. It's hard, and we get that as well. But again, we can change this later on, because I think, as the Italian venture says, smart working, that is the way forward. I mean, we will be seeing this situation, you know, in years to come. Our future has, our way of working has changed, but the problems we're facing because of it haven't. So we can adapt to German, you know, Telearbeit in German would work just as well. But, you know, we've left it the way it is because we wanted to engage with people at a level that they're experiencing at the moment. Of course, you see these ads in huge form. These were actually just banners that we were able to really change out with the publications that we work with locally in the main the countries within a matter of hours. You know, once we had the copy and the design had been done, we could then forward these on via our media agency to get replaced. So we were running the Know You campaign on one day, and the next day we changed it out with the new stuff as well, which of course is the great thing when you're working with a partner like Creative Culture, is that they understand, you know, when we say we urgently need your assistance, they are there to really help you as well. The good thing about the creative as well is that, you know, we got away from the brightness and we sombered the whole thing down with, of course, the great switch, the red, the axis switch, which is the flag. You know, it really is something that gets your attention as well on a page, ultimately of white, you know, white words, the banners and email newsletters that people get as well. So again, these are linked from the banners to a dedicated section on our Fast Forward Live thought leadership platform, really, where we focused all the top articles there were all related to in some way to various businesses who would be facing some kind of, not necessarily cyber threat, but just disruption because of COVID. So we have a dedicated website under AXXL where we can really post thought leadership articles, thought leadership pieces. We have, you know, the occasional podcast there as well. But that's, again, another place where we really worked with, we've been working with Creative Culture in the past as well, because, you know, it's not just about advertising, it's also about other content as well that we've produced in the past. You know, it's not just the talking to the business audiences. We have part of our organization, as you can see there, the ocean education team as part of our corporate social responsibility group. We used Creative Culture there because this type of material is not specifically addressed or dedicated and focused on the business audience. We're sending these things out to schools and working with educational establishments as well. So you know, we're using the right language. We're having to find the right way to talk about what we do. Yeah, we use them for, obviously, for the 1 or 2 articles on Fast Forward as well, when the content is extremely relevant, and things like corporate materials, corporate brochures, corporate presentations, where there's a need for, let's say, a sympathetic way of addressing the audiences. That's where Creative Culture just does a great job for us. Yeah, we've used them on corporate videos as well for voiceovers, and yeah, as I said there, you know, the CSR collateral for the general public, which we've had as well. The good thing about the materials that we produced for the oceans education is that, of course, there's a lot of repetition there, which is where the transcreation memory really helped us as well, because, you know, we could work in separate teams. You know, I'd be working here in Zurich on something, and my colleague in London would be submitting content to be translated as well, or transcreated. But of course, with the transcreation memory, you're actually not duplicating work. You're saving money. The tool will recognize, you know, content, and will find the right matches as well. So again, it's a great way to you know, save money and really be consistent in how you talk. So ultimately, yes, this is it. It's consistency, isn't it? We have, you know, a single point of contact in Creative Culture for all the projects that we do. They have assigned project managers to us that work very closely with the teams, not just here in Zurich, but also elsewhere. Yeah, and as I said before on the COVID stuff, it really was just the fact that they could give us the allotted resources that we needed, and it wasn't just a question of giving you something quick and dirty. We had the same quality of service, i.e. we said, yeah, we're happy with 2 options rather than 3 options that we can look at, and the better of the 2 options was selected. The teams in the markets, because they're dealing with, I would say, what I call the unbiased third party, i.e. it's not marketing or communications in marketing that's telling them what they should be doing. It's someone who really understands their markets, and our guys on the ground, they really appreciate that as well. They understand that, you know, we're making this effort, making this investment to help them sell their products. Of course, the approval processes, they are quite straightforward. We are a small but very efficient team. So of course, we can really reach out to our local leaders, to our local legal teams very, very quickly to get their feedback and and really get the approval to get the ads moving forward, or any materials in fact as well. And of course, because the guys at Creative Culture, they provide us with explanations on why they've made these particular linguistic choices. That just helps the argument as well for us. It just takes away that constant back and forth of, why did you do this and why this, and so it's been really helpful. The most encouraging thing, of course, is the fact that we do actually see quite positive results. We can say that, is it all due to Creative Culture and the great work they do? Well, I think it's to a large part due to that. Of course, a lot depends very much, of course, on how you place your banners on the pages and how you work together with your media. But again, it's the great combination of the two, the language plus the good placement, where we have actually seen really encouraging click-through rates onto our website and also onto Fast Forward, which, I had a recently, just earlier today, a call with our media agency, and the click-through rates over the past couple of weeks have been really high, which is really encouraging to see that people are engaging. They want to have the content that we're providing, and it clearly was a wise move to to really give them advice rather than to try and sell anything to them. So that's something they totally appreciate. But again, bottom line is, we're all together in this, and the results are really encouraging.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Really interesting. I'm aware we're short on time for a few questions, so I will pass on this really quickly. A few additional resources. Laura will be sharing the slides at the end of the process, so please feel free to go and click. There's more about transcreation, the processes, and how it sits in the internationalization process. And also, you're welcome to attend some of our roundtables where we focus on a specific country and look at the opportunities and challenges to communicate and operate there. The next one is Brazil, and it will take place online on the 9th of June.
Thank you. We got a few questions in the chat box and in the Q&A box. So maybe we can just get started with the ones on the chat box, if you want.
Sure, I can read out loud. So when going through the transcreation process and an asset is ready to go live locally, are the local brand teams encouraged to do some pre-testing research in advance? What are the average lead times from concept generation to transcreation to implementation? I realize that this might differ depending on the market, but is there a general rule? Would you like to start on that one, Stephen?
Oh, well, I mean, again, the recent example, we got the COVID stuff sorted in a matter of days. I mean, it can be quite quick. The actual process, let's say, from concept development through to transcreation, can be quite long. Let's say, depending on if we know what we're what the focus of our product is going to be, the product advertising is going to be, then we can move that along quite quickly. We engage with our local experts and say, look, if you want to do this, then you've got to be engaged as well. So it's about engaging, as you said as well. Get your stakeholders all on board to understand the process, and then it can be quite efficient. But I would say, worst case, 6 weeks. Best case, 3 days, but it's a matter of finding the right balance as well. But yeah, it goes quite quickly, and we do engage with the local organizations.
And is there some pre-testing that is undertaken by the teams on the ground? Well,
the teams on the ground, we pre-test ultimately with the finished creative. We will send this out to the countries, and they will then look at it and say, yeah, it's going to work for us. We're happy with that, or we need to change an image here. One of the examples there was the right partner ad, which we created. We sent it out to the local markets. North America came back and said, we don't like the guy with the bun. So we had to Photoshop the bun out of his hair, which is easy enough to do, but it was just that one tiny aspect that just changed it all completely, which we didn't see. What we thought, yes, everyone's going to want it, but it was a bit too hipstery for them. But yeah, no. So it's quite straightforward.
We have another one. Ideally, should transcreational teams be expected from your current creative partner, or a team you should consider in your organization's marketing team?
Well, ultimately, because we are our own creative partner. We have a brand team. We do all the creative ourselves in Zurich and in London and in North America. So yeah, I've made an important point to everyone on the team. I don't drive it ultimately. I just say that if we're going to do this, then we're going to do it properly, and because it just otherwise it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money as well, and it's frustrating. So yeah, I mean, they're all on board, and that's perfectly okay.
Mm-hmm. I think this one relates a bit to the one we had before about testing. Given the level of creativity of your adverts, how did you ensure at the creative stage that the visuals and the copy would resonate in the different markets? Did you, and if you did, how did you do that?
Well, obviously, you know, when we selected the images, we're part of a bigger brand. I mean, we're part of the AXA brand, and you know, let's say the choice of images, we don't do the shooting ourselves. We use stock where possible. And of course, we get the guidance from AXA Group as to what we should be doing, how we should be looking at things. So, of course, if we cover, let's say, all ethnicities and sexes, then we're fine. You know, we're covered by that. And of course, we have the guidance from them as well. So, yeah.
Okay.
And that was, yeah, it's straight. Once we have the creative, and again, photoshopping a bun out of someone's hair is easy, but yeah, and the copy, of course, is signed off locally as well by legal and by the countries.
Another one, we're talking about communications being locally relevant through transcreation. Can we encourage a global regional transcreation model, i.e. centralized transcreation agency, as opposed to working with agencies based in the market? I think this is an interesting one, and one that you talked about and I did a bit early on. I think it's making them understand that it's a collaborative approach with them. So we're not taking away any power from the local markets by doing a centralized transcreation model. On the contrary, is providing them with the right experts that will help them convey the messages and still be consistent with the global sort of strategy and tone of voice. What's your take on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, because we are a small team, but we operate globally. We have, as I said, the stakeholder buy-in initially. But of course, we don't just use, let's say, the creative or the copy in for any one platform. You know, we try to beg, steal, and borrow, as we say, and use, let's say, some of the creative from the No You Can campaign as part of a trade event as well. We branded our booth at an international trade event last year using the No You Can campaign, and it worked just as well in German and English and what have you. I mean, we try to be as broad as we possibly can in how we do these things. Yeah, but it's an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether you could get the buy-in from a huge organization, you know, to work with one agency. I would like to encourage people to do that, because it really is a nightmare if you don't. It really is, or it can be.
Great. Laura, do we have time for one more? Or is it a 4 p.m. hard break?
Yeah, we can take the last one. It's quite easy to answer, I think. It's a yes or no question, right?
So I guess another one for you, Stephen. With the speed of digital, do you use extensive A/B testing against different methods of conveying the message for each locality or language?
I would like to say we don't. We should, but we just sometimes in these situations just don't have the time. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you and to attendees who stayed until the end. If you have any questions that you didn't think of or didn't want to ask but would like to get an answer, feel free to send an email to Stephen or Melanie. Their contact details was on the last slide of the presentation. Thank you so much.